For those that were waiting to come on, I'm sure you're familiar with, we're going to do containment for ourselves and for whatever device you're using. And if you'd like to contain each other, that's helpful too. Thank you very much. Today we're going to have Chief High Priest Mr. H as a guest because some of the movies involve racial issues, and I am not qualified for really getting to the crux of it. I can today we watched these certain movies and with Chief and he shared with me his opinions, and I had to I wrote them down, but it's better to hear it from him instead of me. If I have an idea, I'll submit it to him and he'll share what he feels about these particular movies that are on Netflix, and also one that's not on Netflix, which was the movie Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, the first one. When I first watched that movie, I liked it. And then now that I think about it in a Neo Shamanic perspective, I'm like kind of program embarrassed that I liked it. But I mean, that's the part about the Neo Shamanic journey, is just understanding where you were before and now where you are now, and how much your mindset has changed, and even how much your life has totally changed. I mean, mine has, and I've watched you all, and you've really grown from the way your perspective is when I first had seen you during a session until now, like day and night. So thank you all for your efforts to be on the forum. I appreciate all of you. And to start off with, I'm going to start with Halloween, if that's okay with you, unless someone has a question and you'd like to start with that.
Halloween was so awkward. Yeah, I'm interested to hear. So
okay.
program.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
I have a question about routines too.
Sure.
Because I feel like last time you talked a little, like density can kind of hack in if you have something that you do over and over again. And then are there any and then is it then a program to your body wake up usually at a certain time, or is that just again like a program? Are there routines that are a little more natural, I guess?
In my opinion, it does feel more natural for me physically to stay awake in the day and sleep at night.
Right.
But it's mostly because from what I've observed, I'm sure, if you want to ask this on the forum, that's a great question. Ask the chief. This is a great question too. From my opinion, it's because the avatar of people's bodies in this realm are low vibrational. It is more susceptible to being, like we said, it's about being fed on in this realm. So you're not just dealing with how much you need to sleep, you're also dealing with how much you're being fed on. And you're dealing with the mental weaknesses that you have that leave you open to being fed on. So how much you need to sleep can depend on that. Also, whatever your energy is doing, like after you've had sessions with Chief, it will also determine how much sleep you need. So you really are better off at determining how much sleep you need compared to what the system says you need. Do you need 8 hours? Do you need 5 hours? After some of Chief's sessions, I need 13 hours of sleep to just recuperate so that I can, balance out from all the density that he pulled out of my energy. So you are your best gauge at how much sleep you need. And you don't have to feel guilty. I remember I slept 13 hours after a session, and there's this voice in my head like, you're a lazy bum, but they don't understand about energy. They don't understand about Neo Shamanism and what Chief is taught and how it affects your energy. So after many sessions with Chief and after listening to his wisdom, I've had less. Sometimes I have these times where I can just stay up for a long time and I'm just like, I don't know what's happening to me, but kind of going with the flow, not being afraid that you're staying up for like hours and hours and not feeling tired. It's just understanding, okay, I'm going through something. Fear is not going to help me in this situation. And if that's an okay answer, I'll answer the next question or.
Yeah, that's great.
Okay. You're welcome. Speaking of fear, that's what Halloween is one of its main themes is how fear, terror, and things like that. Um, do you have any familiarity with what Halloween is or why it's celebrated in the way it's why it's celebrated in the way it's celebrated?
Halloween in the past was just like a chance to go out to party like
Right.
5 times a week and just to dress up, and that was so embarrassing.
I see.
Glad that's over.
Gotcha. Um, when I was in the cult in the past, there were some books that I read that had to do with what Halloween is about. And now that I have learned about from Chief about energy and about the script that density has, how they survive is by feeding. So any holiday that they have is going to be anything that they do literally is going to be bottom line, how much essence and vitality can we gather from this situation and who is getting fed. So for example, if in these books they talked about how people are like, why is there pumpkins, why do kids say trick or treat, why do they go around knocking on doors? And in these articles we Chief muscle test for me some situations that was explained in the book that I read when I was in the cult. And that's why I'm sharing it, because I feel it has enough validity for just to help you understand that everything is about bottom line feeding off of essence and vitality. So whether it's Christmas, whether it's Thanksgiving, no matter what movie it is, the bottom line is feeding density with your essence and vitality. So they like the energy of children as density in general. They like the essence of anyone, really, but it's different flavors. You know how, like, when you go to a vending machine, you can get all these, like, different flavored snacks or, soda. And people think, haha, that's funny. People love vending machines. Density is into that, too. They're into different flavors. So whether it's rape, whether it's anger, whether it's jealousy, it's just different flavors of someone's essence and vitality that they feed on to survive. So in these stories about Halloween, it was a ritual where density would give an excuse to show themselves on physically on this night. So they didn't have to wear a costume. If they're a reptilian, if they're, whatever they are, they can just show their form without having to hide it. And there's these kids who, you see they go and get candy and they knock on your door, trick or treat. Well, in the past, it was about a very satanic ritual where these people would come and knock on someone's door and they would say trick or treat. And these families or these people in these towns and places where this practice was held each year, they would demand a sacrifice, meaning that family would either have to give them, I'm not sure, money, and also human sacrifice, whether it was their children or their sister or their mother or someone. And if they gave them a person, a human sacrifice, then they received a jack-o'-lantern. And this jack-o'-lantern sometimes, or most times, had human fat in it, where it would burn and glow in front of the house. And they said that this was to protect them from the dense spirits that would come after them on Halloween. If they said, no, we don't want to offer a sacrifice and get out of here, they would try to spray paint, or there are no spray paint at that time. They would write it in blood, a upside down star, like a satanic symbol, on their house, telling density that this house did not give a human sacrifice, so attack them. So this is all about gathering terror and fear to feed off of people. So every year they would have this ceremony, and they would get essence and vitality, one off the person that was sacrificed, their terror and their essence and vitality, and they're into the blood is the essence and vitality. Just like we talked about with Gaia, the waterways are the ley lines, literally almost like the veins on your body. It's about gathering essence and vitality off of Gaia, gathering essence and vitality off of people too, because consciousness just in different forms, feeding off of their essence and vitality. So then it transformed, because density is all about repackaging, because consciousness wants to move forward. So they get used to, okay, we expect them to come during this time, this is normal, they begin used to, and so the vitality and essence of that terror lessens, because they're just used to war, or they're used to fighting, or used to just being in this state of low vibrational. So then they have to repackage it so they can get a different flavor, right? They're not getting the same level of intensity of terror and fear, so they're changing the flavor to, oh, party, oh, fun, oh, costumes. And then they're literally like, I've heard stories of where these witches, they're still running the same play, the same theater, but they're changing it up. So now they put razor blades in the candies of the kids. They put spells on the candy. Sometimes the children disappear on Halloween. Why? It's a sacrifice. The same script of density to feed off essence and vitality, repackaged, remarketed for a different audience. And these children, if they put themselves right, vitality, that's where they're getting it from. So it's the same thing. They were getting the blood from the sacrifices way back when. Now it's the same thing, just a different flavor, different time, different style, but the same origin. And so if you think about this, you can track once the book comes out, if it comes out about the story of Yin of Yin, you thank you, Ms. J. She's clapping. So it's about understanding the Yin of Yin program and how it's repackaged, no matter whether it's about race, no matter whether it's about family or your country or your friends or anything like that. But I see Jacinda's on, and if Chief wouldn't mind joining me when he's ready, we'll go on to the next thing, if that's okay. Hello. Okay. So when you're ready, Chief. We watched the 40-year-old version on Netflix today, and it was a pretty long movie. So you know how if you watch a movie with commentary, that thing can last for like 5 hours, and the original movie is 2 hours. So we didn't totally absolutely finish. We got to the point where the main character was having an argument with the character named D, the man who makes the music beats, so that we got to that point. But if you'd like to, yes, you are on camera.
Okay. Hello. This is
Hello.
impromptu, everyone. It's interesting because the two movies that were suggested for Ms. A to talk about or review, I guess, on this forum, they ended up being, I would say, somewhat race particular. But I guess we can start with, since you started with the 40-year-old version. Watching that was like opening up a major can of worms, to tell you the truth. But I'm going to ask Jacinda, That was a movie that you suggested, right? Can you hear me?
I can't hear her yet. She's gonna turn her mic on.
Okay.
I most definitely was muted. That's my mistake. Yeah, so
If-
I suggested that movie, and the reason that I suggested it was because I liked it, and I saw elements just in the storyline of. So if you're not familiar with it, it's basically the story of this 40-year-old Black woman who, in her earlier years, in her 20s, has success as a playwright. She was voted like on one of these 30 under 30 most successful creative minds in theater. And so what happened was time got away from her, and she found herself at 40 teaching theater to high school students that could kind of, some were with it, some were like kind of like, oh, who are you to teach us anything about theater when you're failed? And she ends up, this lead woman ends up taking on a new interest, which is being a rap artist at the age of 40. And she gets connected with this person who does beats for rappers, and there becomes like this love interest, and it kind of talks about this whole idea of being an older woman paired with a younger man, because I think there was a 15-year age difference or a 16 or a 14-year age difference. And she ends up eventually getting back into film, and like this whole rap thing is in the back burner of her mind. It was something that ended up being, in my mind, like this idea that gave her the confidence to continue pursuing her creative pursuits. But the reason that I brought it up was because I saw the story and I was like, okay, I kind of rock with the programming that's present in the storyline, specifically speaking about this older woman who, I see myself in, kind of like this person that other people have this expectation of, and then she ends up doing what life has her do, and then she later on in life starts to really pour back into what makes her feel invigorated, pour back into projects that are meaningful for her. And I just was like, okay, there's something in here that's probably all jacked up, right? But in an effort to become more aware of like the media, of the messaging that I'm ingesting, when I decide to watch something that's, kind of in like the pop culture zeitgeist or whatever, like I want to be more aware of what I'm looking at and being able to say, okay, wait, oh, that's something that's harmful. Let's not go down that path.
Yeah. Wow. Great explanation. Yeah, looking at it from what when we were looking at it, I was constantly saying, looking at it from a Neo Shamanic point of view. There are elements that reminded me of the kind of program movies that were targeting Black populace in America around the time I was in my teens. And so there were elements there having to do with a lot of walls. Her starting out, listening to, she's in an apartment, obviously low rent, thin walls, and listening to the neighbors have sex next door. She goes outside. There's a homeless guy out there who harasses her, I guess regularly. Even though sometimes he's kind of funny, but either way, it seemed like it was like a program, in a sense, that was feeding off of someone's sense of genetically what in other words, what their situation is, a common situation, and so on and so forth. And but also over the years, watching these things, there was always supposed to be some kind of a positive meaning to it, where you're supposed to move forward from it. But I mean, like 50 years later, I see a lot of it's just this cyclical type of deal. Now, as far as some of the messages inside of this program having to do with ageism, I can appreciate that it approaches another program of ageism, and also the logic of it, where there are younger people. I remember when I was in my late teens, and someone's talking about another, person, same age group, talking about someone who's like 28 being old, as though that's a world they would never get to or something. It's like this very like at the moment, on the in the moment type of thinking, not expansive. So I would look at it and say, well, unless you're planning on dying soon, you'll be 28, you'll be 30, you'll be 40, you'll be however long you're able to hang in here. So what's your issue around this person's age? So what I saw, there was this support for that in the programming of the movie as well, where a number of kids who were behaving in a certain way where they're denigrating the one young girl who starts to insult her in the earlier parts of the movie in the classroom, having to do with her own anger and basically and her own disillusionment or her own self-hate. She projects it on the teacher.
Mm-hmm.
So if I'm getting off off the path here, just let me know. But I'm actually just looking at it as, again, the whole scenario is a box.
Yeah.
So this box having to do with Black culture in America.
Right.
And what's defined as Black culture in America, that has changed over the last 50 years. So that there are individuals who are in that genetic group that have expanded outward, and are involved in a number of other things that are also just as dense as that realm. But again, the real trick of it is, like, I look at it and say, wow, this is just another support for a system inside of a system that's just messed up. But I think it is worth dissecting and looking into just all the little nuances and all the little ways that the program is supported. So there's a scene where she, her manager, the guy who's a friend for years, who's a manager, Archie, gets her a meeting with this one producer, who's this white guy, and I'm watching it, and I guess one of the things about being mature, I've seen those types of scenes over and over again, and in productions where he plays the stereotypical white guy who basically full of himself and overly egotistical and all that, and he'll say certain things that usually in Black community, if you're in the Black movie theater when I was a kid, they say certain things, go, ooh, like that. But he's saying something, I forgot what he had said, had something to do with her.
Basically, he said, if I may interrupt for one moment, he said that her play, he wanted it to be more, something to the effect of more Black, like it wasn't realistic because of, like the character needed to be more gritty, but he used another term, and it's a term that many Black people would know, like, oh, you want a stereotype, you don't want a real person. Yeah.
Again, it's something that's been in movies for a really long time with that particular type of character. So he's, it's like he doesn't know anything about that community except some stereotypes that have been presented to him from the time he was a kid, and watching anything, if he was watching anything that had anyone who was not, white in it, he would go by, or they would go by the stereotype. I mean, I worked in the professional field in Manhattan, which was predominantly white for decades. And that stuff is really real. It has to do with a lack of exposure. But he has this lack of exposure, also this sense that, he doesn't have to watch what he says. And so he says, it needs to be more Black. And it's like, well, what's more Black? And she was kind of clever. She said, "What do you mean, a single mother crack addict or something, or whatever, just to hit him with his nonsense?
Mm-hmm.
So is this what you're talking about? Do you think this is what is Black people?"
Mm-hmm.
So again, his character was thrown in there as another trigger, I feel.
Mm-hmm.
Whether the writer really means it that way or whatever, the intent that they had in writing the script. but he ended up being a stereotype himself. And then in the movie, there's a number of stereotypical, characters in there. A number of the kids that were in her class were just very, very stereotypical. So, again, always smacked up to me, not all of it, but this part was just literally trying to keep a program going. And when the guy said something that's, would be offhandedly racist, the reaction, would normally, like I said, ooh, or a certain feeling of annoyance, when in reality, I'm just watching a movie. That's not my life. But somehow, when I was younger and susceptible to that, I get roped into that emotion.
Yeah.
Roped into that trigger. After I got old enough, I said, why am I allowing this stuff to trigger me like that? It seems like they keep putting this crap in here for, on purpose. But as years went by, I realized it's just a feeding frenzy. They put things in there to make you uncomfortable, make you feel a certain way. And I mean, there's times I had gone to a movie and it would ruin my whole freaking day. And I'm feeling okay before I walk into the theater. But it's because it's designed to trigger, it's designed to feed. So as far as like her prospects, I like the fact that she wanted to reinvent herself. And it would have to do with something that she was doing before, having to do with rhymes and so on and so forth. Which again, I could glean her talent, but a lot of what she was talking about was extremely ratchet.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's really talented, but this stuff is ratchet, man. So it's like this confusion of like, well, she's spitting some serious rhymes, and and it makes sense, and so on and so forth. And say, but I'm not gonna be. I don't know if you recall when Bill Cosby, back in the '80s, he was just ripping on all the black comedians who came out and cursing and stuff.
Yeah.
I'm not into the Bill Cosby point of view about anything. The reality of it is it's a person's freedom to express themselves and however they want to express themselves. But for me, I'm looking into it and I'm just reading what it's supporting. So there's a point where I don't know if you've ever run into it. When I was younger, if I didn't speak enough slang, I was told that I taught white.
Always. Yeah, that's a hallmark of my upbringing, for sure.
Yeah.
Social situations. Yeah. Definitely.
So again, we're talking about programming within a certain genetic group. If we go deeper into the Neo Shamanic view of it, and the work that I've done over the years, there are past lives. There are past expressions. And so I'm working on somebody, and I'm finding that this black woman was an Asian man in a war in China, 400 years ago, and that's why her leg is swelling up. And doctors can't figure out why her leg keeps swelling up like that with all this pain. So I go in, I'm able to glean it with the help of my wife, and I'm able to find that there's these realms that are not being mentioned. So even looking at this movie and looking at the kids in her students in the room, in the classroom, I don't know how many were in there. About 5 kids.
6 or 7, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, 5 or 6 kids. But really, how many consciousness are in that room, really? So you got 5 kids, and they got attachments galore. So you may have about 30 or more other entities in there.
Yeah.
And the argument that ensued with the girl and the Latino girl, the Puerto Rican girl, I believe she was Puerto Rican. That ensued was something that should not even have to get to that level in the first place. But what's behind them pushing those buttons to cause something just as minor as, I guess, what the one guy said, the girl just wanted her to compliment her rap.
Her rap, yeah.
What is it behind that's pushing them to that point where they want to literally go to blows over it?
Yeah.
There's something going on behind the scenes. So if I'm watching movies, I'm watching everything and I'm looking at what's behind the scene of the story. This is more like a docudrama or something, the way this movie unfolds. So there's some realism to it. and looking at it and just reading how things are set up, I read, the programming. I read that there's this, the density that's behind it. I read they have walls put up around, individuals thinking that there's only certain avenues for getting out of a situation like that. So if it's not academia, then the only thing you got left is sports and rapping and, and crooning or some, which is nothing wrong with doing any of those things. But those are limitations. And when you have that going on, you got several million kids in the major city, and there's only so much room for star rappers and star basketball players and star football players and so on and so forth. Mm-hmm. So again, this literally, supporting literally a program that gets individuals targeting a certain area, focusing a certain area, to try to so-called escape the situation, which again, there are more than that, those many options there. There are a lot of ways of getting out of that type of a deal. So again, going back to the fact that I like the fact that she was trying to reinvent herself. She was doing something, pushing, I guess, pushing the line or just pushing through a wall. That she's 40 years old and she shouldn't be rapping. And there's like that old lady that was walking around with a walker, who we call the Smith.
Yeah.
Yeah, she, it's like, why are you even on the street anyway? You got home somewhere.
Feeding,
yeah, so she's out feeding.
Walking the streets and feeding
and tuning into somebody who maybe their light is starting to expand because they're getting excited about moving forward into something else, even though they're moving out of one chicken coop or one box into a bigger box. Yeah. But nonetheless, they're still moving.
Yeah.
So again, I'm not going to knock people for not knowing the things that I'm talking about. This is where they are. They're trying to deal with what they, with what's been handed to them in this situation. And within that situation, she's trying to actually find something that makes her feel at least like what she's doing is worthwhile.
Understand.
So she goes into, the rap. There are some other instances in the movie where there's an unrealistic sense of expectations from others, I believe, to, in other words, to treat her a certain way. There was a funny line from her manager who told her to show up and dress a certain way and try to be on time.
Yeah.
Which, I kind of felt, okay, that's one that's been out there for a good long time. Black people show up late all the time.
Yeah.
I never showed up late for anything.
Mm-hmm.
Unless there was a car accident or something, I was always early, as a matter of fact. So that was another, one of these little things they push in there, and we go laugh, ha 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 ha. Yeah, black people are late. But again, when it came to actual business and dealing with this level 1 stuff, she had to change her play so that she can get the play, produced so that she can actually get her career rolling again in this level 1 zone. But she's struggling with her integrity or her her sense of sense of integrity, sticking with what she thinks is the right. And that also can be a damaging program because you're in a realm of density that doesn't give a crap about integrity or anything. Right. It's all about feeding. So I had to side with her manager when he was, they finally, she, went ahead and did the changes and they were doing the rehearsals or whatever. And she says, I don't feel good about this. But the manager said, look, let this one go. The next one can be what you want it to be. Mm. But she was still struggling with her sense of, an integrity. Mm-hmm. Or even that term, I'm quite sure you've heard, selling yourself out.
Yeah, selling out.
Which, and that's a trigger, word. And that's one that's used to jerk people around. because you've decided, okay, this is a game, and part of this game means I have to, in other words, sacrifice this piece of artwork so that I can get to the point where I can do my own artwork. But I'm hemming and hawing about it, and and frustrating the heck out of her manager, because she's talks to this one guy, I don't know if he's a black playwright or screenwriter, also the guy that had her sit and face the wall and said he's talking to ancestors.
Oh,
and all
yeah. That was he owned a theater, a black theater, and she was originally going to have her show there, but he was saying no. She wanted to charge people to see the show because she wanted to make money off the play, and that's when he said, so she could pay her rent. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, in so many words, he just was telling her, "You should do it for free."
And blame
the ancestors say you should do it for free. This reminds me of some people that we've dealt with recently. But the ancestors say, and she said, "Well, whose ancestors are you talking to? Maybe you should talk to my ancestors."
Yeah, because I think they want me to make money. They want me to live.
Yeah, So, but again, it was it was one of these stories that I've seen, and unfortunately, I've run into it in real life. Dealing with the community when I lived in Los Angeles, I dealt with some individuals like that who literally he's making money from something. He gets if he's has a theater, he's probably got this city support. He gets money to keep that theater going, but he wants to get everybody else's talents for free.
Right.
And then he'll talk about race and ancestors and all this other stuff, when in reality he's nothing more than someone who's just a swindler. He's just a schemer. So again, going back to what she was doing, I understand, and I can understand what you're saying, that yes, she decided to move beyond these barriers having to do with race. And then this situation where she was involved with this guy, D, who wrote all the beats and got romantically involved with him, which wasn't the smartest thing to do, I don't think.
Mm-hmm.
He seemed like someone who was on her side, but in reality, he also had his agenda.
Mm-hmm.
He saw that there's something, that he could actually make money off of, or make even a bigger name for himself by using this individual's talent. But after they make love, what happens? He starts to feel like he can just start critiquing her.
Mm-hmm.
Why you wear this rag? You'd say rag. Why you wear this scarf on your head? All the time. But it wasn't until after he made love he felt confident enough. It's like, okay, that gives me the right to just start to pick at her.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And he did pick at her before a little bit with, he said her play was BS, which, but again, that, with that part of the feminine wanting and having this desire for relationship, it started to really, pull her in certain directions. If she was standing alone, still standing pat and not having a relationship with this guy, I don't think she would have been affected as much by what he thought.
Right.
Yeah.
That's interesting too, because in the film, sorry to interrupt, in the film, they frame it like this, as if it's a care for him to say this to her, because he's like intimating that maybe she doesn't love herself fully. That's why you hide behind this rap. But then the other side of that is, whether intended or not, which I'm understanding, right? Because you can have the intention to say this, but density gets in where it gets in. But also the idea is also there that, let me scrutinize your appearance because this is odd to me. Do something different. Mm-hmm. That's also present as well. And that's something that, just being aware of that too, I really appreciate this analysis, because I'm seeing how you have the projected image on the screen, but then there's that deeper meaning behind the pictures that seeps into our psyche, into our spirit, that feeds off of us and creates this internal dis-ease, about ourselves, appearance, intellect, creative expression, all of this. I'm seeing this now.
Mm-hmm.
Understanding it.
Yeah, you share some stuff, with sessions, which I'm not going to share with anyone because that's personal, but having to do with appearance.
Yeah.
And, deciding that this is how you want to dress. This is, the mode of transportation you want to use, which was very, very practical. But because of the program, his program, what's wrong with her wearing the scarf on her head if that's what she wants to wear? But I get, there's this little tricky thing. Well, do you really truly respect yourself if you're wearing this scarf on your head and covering your hair?
Yeah.
When the real issue is, why is she drinking diet drinks all the time? And poisoning herself.
And getting angry when people ask her why she's drinking.
Yeah, get angry when someone asks, why are you poisoning yourself?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, the thing that would, the logical thing that would help her would be eat less.
But you brought up that a lot of times when people identify with their culture as a mass, you said it's like being in a box with all these other people, and when you take their weight and their worries, their concerns, their lifestyles, their issues on yourself, it can contribute to the weight gain.
Yeah, it can hold weight, and one of the things I found, actually with certain clients, that once they start to pull that weight off of them, that sense that they're responsible for every Black person or every person in their so-called family, all of a sudden it's easier for them to control how much they eat, and they start to lose weight.
Absolutely. I've experienced this. That is, I personally can attest to this. In the past, week, not even a week, 4 days, I've had people comment on the fact that I'm looking slimmer. And it's not that too much, and it's not that anything else has changed. It's literally that I don't feel the weight. I don't feel that. I'm not carrying this. I'm like, these are separate expressions, experiences, people. I'm responsible for me, and I'm keeping as best as I can, myself contained, so I don't take on what is not meant for me to take on.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
And a lot of times people don't really see it. So that's when you come to me, and I start to extract, and everyone generally says that they feel a lot lighter.
Yes.
Because there is that density that I'm pulling off of you.
Yeah.
That adds to that weight. Even in the book, I talk about. One of my siblings calls it the Nephilim something, but it has to do with how a person walks and how heavy their steps are, their footsteps are. And she said, well, so-and-so's walking like a Nephilim, which means, these giant humanoids who's, of some fable or whatever, who never really existed. But literally, that's the density weighing that person down to the point where their footsteps are even heavy. Yeah. So again, going back to what Ms. A was saying, when I was talking about just being in a certain type of box and allowing yourself to be put in a certain racial box, where logically, I addressed this a long time ago for myself. Am I really responsible for what happens to every Black person?
Right.
In my neighborhood, on the planet, or whatever. Am I responsible? So one of the things that I've had stories of it's like my parents would tell me things that if you're going to do something that may be a little dicey, don't do it with a group of people. Because inevitably somebody's going to spill the beans. And I had that experience having to do with years and years ago when I was in art school in Pittsburgh, and we were making bus passes for ourselves because we didn't have that much cash.
Oh, wow.
And I was very good at it, And so I made my own bus pass. I was able to ride the bus for for free for about a year, until some guy that was in school with me said, "This is what we're doing." He makes his jacked up bus pass, and he puts it in front of the bus driver's face, and he holds it there.
Slowly.
Whenever we did it, the other guys, me and the other guys, we did it. with a a film of plastic, kind of dirty, a little dirty, but not so dirty you can't see through it. And we show them and we move on.
Yeah.
And no problems. This nitwit holds his jacked up bus pass, and the guy doesn't say anything, but he reports that there's these kids from the school who are like, forging bus passes. Anyway, which put an end to, to us being able to do it, because they started scrutinizing the passes a lot more. But again, it's like sharing something. So if you're in this group and you want to have an allegiance to this group, it even goes as far as like even a family, allegiance to a family, and you got a real wild card in your family.
Oh yeah.
At some point I'm going to say, well, am I going to sacrifice myself for the wild card, or I'm just going to separate myself from them? So I became more renegade in the sense of how I dealt with it, with that whole issue around race. I dealt with people that were cool with me, and dealt with people who I could get along with. I didn't care where they came from, and I had a much easier go of it.
Got it.
So I don't know if I know that you were saying that you liked the fact that she was, in other words, pushing the envelope, going through the changes. We didn't get a chance to totally finish it because there was commentary. I had no idea. If I knew I was going to have so much commentary over this movie, we would have started watching it if we could. We were pretty busy, so that's one of the reasons we had to wait till the morning to watch it.
Mm-hmm.
Would have started watching it a couple of days ago. So I don't know exactly how it ends.
I mean, it ends, the way that it shores up is that conflict between the two students who ended up, like the one Black girl who was upset at the teacher, yelled at her, all of this. Well, it turns out that the girl really wasn't upset at the teacher. The girl had a crush on the Latin student.
Oh.
And so they ended up dating at the end, or not. The idea was that, finally it was revealed from the Black girl to the Latin student that there was a crush. So there's definitely, that was like the behind the scenes of that narrative. And she, and what she ends up doing when the play, the day that her play debuts, it's a sellout, or it does really well. Everyone has a butt in their seats, like all the seats are filled, and she's like ambivalent, do I go, do I not go? And then she decides to go at the very end of her, like the last few minutes of the play. And she stands up on stage and faces the audience and then just says, this play is trash. It's trash, it's not my play. I made something that I'm not proud of. I'm proud of the people that perform, but I'm not proud of what I did to make this happen. And she just got off the stage and left. And then she, like her friend, the Asian guy that represents her, they connected. And he was just like, I'm proud of you. Like, you do what you need. You did what you needed to do, so on like this. And then she left and she connected with the young guy, D. And you can see her start rapping again and talking about like the next play, and then they're like walking down the street together, and it's like, dark outside, and that's kind of how it ends.
Okay. Well, that's an interesting program too, where one of the things I also learned over the years is like, you don't have to let everybody know how you feel.
Yeah.
That part where she goes and she proclaims that, she doesn't like this is crap. That really is totally unnecessary. It's a fruitless, display. And in the end, it's, again, we're talking about a scenario that's happening in a bullshit, realm. This realm is BS, and everything, has its walls and, so on and so forth, or illusions of walls. And so, yes, she moves from this one zone to another zone, and then back into another zone. Yeah. But she still wants to say on her terms, but she doesn't even know what her own terms are.
Right.
Again, I get the positive aspect of her, and there's some funny stuff in it, I get the positive aspect of her doing her thing, but they cloud it with this lack of stealth.
Yeah.
So if she was really clever, it's like, okay, yeah, thank you very much for enjoying the play. get off the stage. If she's doing this, she's actually, I don't know if it's like you thumb your nose at the ones who are backing whatever it is that you're doing. So she could do that. She could do the rap, but she didn't need to sit there and burn one bridge and then try to build another one. My next play, well, if she pissed the guy off who jacked up her play, she's hoping that someone else is going to want to produce her next play. Dumb business. So one of the things for me, I had to move away from that kind of concept of, I'm selling out. That's just a catchphrase that they throw to people who, it's like throwing bait and taking the bait. And I've heard that sellout stuff, since I was in my late teens, about people selling out and selling out. And the ones been around long enough to know when I was married to a jazz musician, and they used to do that kind of stuff too, about someone that they considered have crossed over into like soft jazz or something like that. Yeah. But they were getting more play, crossing over to something that the masses were more interested in listening to. And they were told that they were sellouts. And I was married to this person long enough to see the person who they considered to be a sellout. I said, well, I'm in business. I'm running my own business. It's not about selling out unless I'm really denigrating and disrespecting myself. And I'm not disrespecting myself. What her art is just a thing that she can do. Is that the only thing she could create? No. So she's talking about creating another play. Well, let that one go. Yeah. You got some momentum behind you. Get over it. It's not it's not defining you as a person or as a consciousness. It's just a vehicle. And if she looked at it in that way, things would have gone smoother for her in the first place. The problem with a lot of individuals who come from a lower rung, that lower rung, they don't understand business. And business is a BS realm. It really is. But if you're going to play it, learn how to play the game, and don't complain that you don't have money to pay for your rent because you're afraid of selling out, or this concept of selling out, which isn't selling out. It's just making a logical move so that you get to the point where you can do what you want to do. And the same thing happened with these jazz musicians. These guys did whatever this light stuff, and these guys were, for 10 years calling them sellouts, but these guys did really well, and then all of a sudden they're bringing out recordings that has to do with just what they want to do. Because they set, they set it up for them that way. They kind of understood some things. There's a whole lot of soul selling going on also out there in this, in this realm as well. So that's another thing when I watched it, was like, wow, a can of worms, all kinds of things are going on. But the general thing that you enjoyed, I relate to that, I understand that. Okay. Yeah. So outside of the Neo Shamanic point of view, if you're in a box and you're moving forward, that's good. You're moving. You're trying to move. Yeah. But due to the lack of understanding about things that are really, really important, they're running around still chasing their tail. I got success in this, but you always see you have to keep producing, have to keep producing constantly in order to continue to succeed in that. And there's this hierarchy of individuals who are producers that you have to answer to. So it's a nice, it's nice in that sense that it's about an inspiration of a woman who's 40 and decides that I'm not rolling over and laying down. Gotcha. But in the end,
she rolled over into another box.
She rolled over into another box.
It's the shifting of the boxes. I'm seeing this. I really appreciate this analysis, because it's like, I did not see any of this, and I've taken notes, and I'm like, okay, all right. Like, I want to be consciously consuming this stuff, not like subconsciously, like, oh, it's and not understanding why I feel a certain way, or something of this one on the other side. So I feel that with this analysis, like, I have more information, to apply to the next film that I watch. But I appreciate you taking the time for this. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Okay, my pleasure. And you will find yourself looking to reading between all the lines with every movie you watch from this point on. Actually. I don't know, we're good then? That,
if you'd like to, I can just continue, or if you want to continue, I can.
Well, I think we covered. I think that was
Okay.
a good covering of that. I didn't know if you wanted the Willy Wonka thing, but I think that's pretty funny stuff.
Yeah.
But I think you can handle
I
it.
think I can.
So anyway, thank you everyone for putting up with me for a few minutes, and I'll talk to you guys later.
Thank
Okay,
you.
bye.
See you.
Okay.
Well, similar vein, but not exactly the same. Uh, when we watched the movie, or yes, the film 40-year-old version, there's a lot of things, so many things that could come up, and those sort of things has to do with your perspective. I remember, Chief, we talked about it, a prison for the mind. So in the movie, the 40-year-old version, it was like she was imprisoned in this financial bracket, and she was looking for a way to free herself. And some people, so for example, did end up with all the money that she wanted, all the fame that she wanted. What then? Isn't she still a prisoner in her own mind? Isn't she imprisoned to? Thank you. She's imprisoned to the concept of her race, or her genetics, and that follows all kinds of things. Some people, even though they've left the mafia, they still feel like, or they left the military, they still feel like they're in an inner turmoil of war inside of themselves, though they're not on the battlefield anymore. So like this woman, she's racing, pushing really hard to change her financial status, but her health is not so good, and drinking the Diet Coke, and she was talking about her skin being dry and these sorts of things. So even if she got this money, how long would she be able to be alive to so-called enjoy it? And these sorts of things are a limited perspective. And in previous forums, we talked about the yin of yin character entity who ended up creating this kind of realm. And it's interesting because I'm just going to use this as a segue into the Willy Wonka movie, because there's a song, maybe you're familiar with it, but it's called Pure Imagination.
I think so.
Yes. Come with me and you'll be in a world of pure imagination. And take a look and you'll see imagination. We'll begin with a spin, traveling in the world of my creation. What we'll see will defy explanation. If you want to view paradise, simply look around and view it. Anything you want to, do it. If you want to change the world, there's nothing to it. So he's saying, oh yeah, you can change the world, you can do anything you want to, but it's in this realm of my creation. So are you really free? Are you really doing whatever you want to do? Is there any real concept of free will when you're in someone else's fishbowl? So it applied to the 40-year-old version. She was stuck in this horrible fishbowl, not knowing how to get out. And every time she wanted to make a decision that would take her into a different expression, different limited expression, there was always these people that would show up. Like the guy who offered her weed right before she was going to do, or offered her a blunt right before she was going to rap and show her talent. And also, it's a limited perspective as defining yourself by some talent or something that you do. Because if we view ourselves as consciousness, we're more than an artist, more than a rapper, more than a singer, more than a dancer, more than a writer. So all these things keep you stuck in this prison of the mind. Excuse me. Is everyone familiar with that movie, the Willy Wonka movie?
I am.
Yeah.
Yes. So as the movie goes on, it's about a young kid who he's living in a very impoverished situation, So when people view movies, view films, anything that's talking about poverty, you get those who feel that they're living in poverty and they're angry at those who have more, angry at those who are controlling, who what control the system, but they're not seeing behind the people that they think are controlling the system to see that density is behind them controlling the system, creating this realm called of poverty that's keeping them in this fishbowl. Chief talked to a client recently and he said the wall is there because you believe it is there, because consciousness and the way that consciousness expresses themselves does not have to be so tapped down like it is here, but the mind keeps it and believes in it. Oh, I'm suppressed by the man. You know, even women, I'm suppressed by the man. In that movie, the 40-year-old version, the guy who owned the black theater, he wasn't ignoring her and just, you know, pushing her off, and so it would get essence and vitality from women who feel that men suppress them, that they put them down, that they don't give them a chance to show, to shine. But even when they consider it shining, it's just still within the fishbowl, still within the parameters of the prison of the mind. So what Chief teaches is to take people outside of everything that defines them, to let go of everything that you ever thought defined you. So in the film, the young Mexican student, she considered herself gay. So you're defining yourself by your sexuality, you're defining yourself by your race. So these are all different fishbowls where it is a prison of the mind, instead of viewing yourself as consciousness. When women, like as we said before, when women hate men, they've been men before. How can you hate? You've also had too. So it's like even the racial issues, most clients that Chief has had have had many, every race that's on, so many have had so many of the races that you see. They've had an expression where they were in that physicality. So it's like maybe the last life they were highly melanated, or the last life before that they were not highly melanated and they were racist against this group. And then in the next expression, density throws them into the expression that they were taught to hate. So that fuels the treatment of where people view themselves in a certain race, but then they're fighting one another because they're not counting all the expressions that they've had before. They are unaware of it. That's why when Chief clears you enough, some clients even have memories of their past expressions. It's about clearing and healing of a consciousness in totality. Because even if this consciousness changes their financial status, is their energy cleared? Is their trauma cleared? I saw on the 40-year-old version, she was, you know, rapping about her mom, and it was, people would view that as, oh, she's trying to heal herself, but the trauma is still there, but she's just trying to help herself move on. Recently, Chief helped me to come to a realization about the relatives that I had before and what they really were. I believed that the father unit that I had actually cared about me. And because I believed in that and I wanted to believe in that and I had denial that he didn't care about me, I kept his density in my energy. So when people believe in this racial bracket defines me, they keep it in their energy. They cannot free themselves from the prison of the mind. So in this case, I had to come to grips with that. The father unit was a pedophile and he molested me when I was a little kid. That the grandfather unit was a pedophile and he molested me when I was a little child. And why I would always feel like I had been molested or been raped, but I didn't understand it because I blocked that memory off. Sometimes I know many women will block out cases of rape or molestation because they don't know what to do with that information because it's so painful. Like sometimes when someone dies in their family that's really close to them, sometimes they'll just block off the feeling that they consider pain. They'll block off, try to forget, but it's just burying it all underneath all the density all over, and then pushing it down, almost like making a bomb that has this pressure. And then whenever something happens in your life to trigger it, because density wants to trigger it so that they can get the essence and vitality. And so whenever Chief, I told Chief, I see a vault in my energy, and the vault is starting to glow and rattle. And he said, you don't need a vault in your energy where you hold this trauma, where you hold this pain that you consider pain. Because remember, it's your belief in the pain, your belief in the trauma. When you can see yourself as consciousness, you can begin to move out of the thought that this expression defines you, because you've had many other expressions. But the forward motion is the most important part, and not just forward motion into another box where you're defining yourself again by someone else's concepts. This time, you're moving forward into consciousness that has freedom to express, expand, explore, and experience. And those are the things that Chief teaches about. I remember one of Chief's associates told me, we use their rules to break them, then we break their rules. Chief was one of the top 10 illustrators in New York. And he fought so hard to get there. He used their rules to break them, and then now he's breaking their rules. That's what Neo Shamanism is about. Breaking the rules, breaking the prison of the mind, breaking the everything that keeps you in a limited perspective. Because if you're only defined by race, it's a limited perspective. If you're only defined by your occupation, again, it's a limited perspective. So even in this concept of the Willy Wonka, you'll see that many times where someone will say, like even a family member, they'll try to take you under their wing and say, oh, you know what, I want you to be a queen. I want you to be, you know, this amazing thing, but you have to do everything I say the way I say it. And I pretty much want you to be a mini me. How is that freedom? How is that changing the world? How is that really expressing experience and expanding when you're stuck in a fishbowl of someone else's making? So that's why I always tell people, if you just take the steps that Chief shares with you, he will help you step by step to get somewhere. Because density, they'll usually try to tell you, oh, you can't. Oh, don't. You don't have it in you to escape the prison of the mind. You don't have it in you to be free of this limited perspective. You don't have it in you to free yourself of this belief that you're defined by your race, your occupation, your talents. You don't have it in you to be more than that, to expand past that. Or they'll tell you, whenever Chief starts teaching about Neo Shamanism and about freedom, people will the density on them will tell them, oh, forget baby steps, start running, try to clear everyone you see, try to go clear your evil granny that's walking around on the streets trying to trigger everyone she sees. That's part of density, trying to get you to go too far, go too fast. But instead of just small baby steps, because a lot of people, they'll come and, wanting to help people, I understand that that's something that's sometimes been pushed on people, or if I don't care about people, maybe I'm a bad person. Again, you're being defined by a concept of what is care. Actually, what you care about can bring a weakness to you energetically, can weaken your containment that Chief teaches. Like, for example, maybe you're containing your grandma, but you're open, or you're containing your aunt, but you're open to your nephew and your niece. You really like them. So actually, that aunt can still feed on you through the nephew and through the niece, because you have this concept of care. So instead, you can define yourself as consciousness. These are just other consciousness in this play that they call life. In this play that they call existence. In this play that's in this fishbowl. So once you can separate yourself from your nephew, your niece, your aunt, your mom, your dad, these people as other consciousness on their own journeys, then they can't feed on you in the same way, because you're not open. Being impressed by things can also make you open. Like in the movie Willy Wonka, they come up to this huge candy factory, and it's all about being impressed. Look at how much money he has. Look at this huge facility. Look at all this fanfare. You got TV news casts, and you got all these people that showed up just to watch the people who got the tickets for Willy Wonka to go into this really big candy factory. So when you're impressed with someone's wealth, when you're impressed with how many followers they have, when you're impressed with how they look, what their body type, what their shape looks like, how pretty or how talented they are, you're opening yourself up. So instead, you're like, that's that consciousness, that's their journey. When you see yourself in a more balanced way and more respect and consideration for yourself and your own talents that you're coming into, because the talents that are shown in this realm are nothing compared to the talents that you can have as a free consciousness. Empathing is just one of those expressions that Chief brings out in people, and that empathing ability is far more expansive than being a rapper, being a singer, being a dancer. All those things are defined by density as okay, but being an empath is not okay, especially when you use the tools that Chief teaches you how to make empathing a tool to protect your own energy. Because even in the 40-year-old version, they're going after the money, going after the money. But the most valuable commodity in this realm is actually energy. So what is she really going after? Is what she's really going after is actually meaningless if you view it in that perspective, that energy is the most valuable commodity. And I didn't, like, before I met Chief and Nami, I didn't know any of that. I was so confused, and I just felt like I just need to transition because I don't understand this realm, and the father unit had died a few years before I came to Thailand, and so I felt lost because I had let this person become my world. So some people, they let a person become their world. Some people, they let this dream of money or dream of an occupation or this or that be their world. So it allows density to just thrive inside of their energy. During sessions, she found that there's what density called a map of your energy. People have maps of their energy where there's an anime called Sword Art Online, and you can find it on Netflix, and it's about virtual reality game where you play, you can fight monsters, you can go on quests, you can find like magical items, and you're working like maybe in a forest. And then they create another level. So on the next level they're in the desert, and they have to find like secret ruins and things like that. And then the next level is like an ocean game where you swim deep in the depths and you find different magic artifacts and things like that. So people think, oh, that's funny, oh, very interesting and creative show, but that's actually sometimes how energy is like within people that are having sessions. Chief says that people are like terrain, like mountains and valleys and pits. They have all kinds of weird they have attachments and things living in these terrain that's all over their body. That's why he'll work on the head, because there's lots of attachments and things in the head, which is also a part of the terrain. So it's not just the terrain that you're experiencing in this expression, but every other expression you have, layer upon layer. So if this expression is the first layer, the next expression is beneath that, and the next expression beneath that, beneath that. So if you've been recycled many times in density, you will have many layers. That's why density has what they call a map. And within these layers, there are these spheres of memory that are cyclical, where just a bad moment is played out over and over. When he talked about the woman who had a swollen leg because 400 years ago she was an Asian man, and in this life she's a black woman. So this leg situation was an expression in one of those layers. She busted through several layers to get to that expression that was causing her leg to swell. She couldn't get those answers from the doctor. She couldn't get those answers from any of the other Reiki people or whatever that she was going to. She had to get that from Chief, because Chief has not been recycled in dense expressions. He has no map, nor his daughter. And I have a map. Everyone everyone else has maps. So that's what makes it very difficult. People don't understand, like, why can't I just be cleared in one day? Your body cannot handle the trauma it would take to break down every one of those layers and all those attachments that they have and all those mirror consciousness that they have. So all these things, they keep people from being able to express their intent. When Chief says that you use your intent to do containment. So what it is, it's your intent. It has to be filtered through all those layers that I was talking to you about, all those layers of your expressions, all those layers of attachments living in your energy, all those layers of mirror consciousness living in your energy, and then your intent can come through. So that's why he says, instead of trying to create your own protection with, light or rainbows or whatever, use his tools, because he doesn't have those layers, and he's letting you borrow his energy. That's why I think it's retarded that there was this one client that is no more a client, and he tried to steal Chief's thunder by saying that I'm the reason why he's doing these things, that he's giving the credit to me instead of Chief, like I'm the power, when I'm not. I wouldn't be an empath if it wasn't for Chief. And I remember the session that I had with him, and Chief and associates asked me, do you want this ability? Do you want it? It will be painful, but if you endure it, there will be a reward. And all I could think was, if I could just continue my expression in a balanced supreme consciousness universe, that is reward enough. But I said yes. And after that day, the empathing ability just increased day after day. And at first it made me feel really weird and disoriented, but I began to find uses for it. I began to be able to sense what was in a room when I went into the room. I was able to sense how many entities were in a room whenever I would go to McDonald's or go to whatever store I needed to go to. And then I could be able to feel what I needed to contain. And then after that, it began to change, and I realized it was useful to Chief. He doesn't need to use me even for empathing. He can empath everything on his own, but he lets me be an empath. He lets me take part in the experience, and because he said that it's easy for him to just pull it out of me, but whenever I have to go purge, he pulls it out of himself by empathing the client. And for example, just yesterday, there was a client where it was about their density has many different, what I talked about, repackaging of the same kind of expression where they can feed off the essence and vitality. So this is an example of, people talk about zombies and they laugh, haha, oh, it's just fake. But there are people who delve in dense magics, and they will, when a person's body, they die, they'll, instead of letting the body just rot in the ground, a dense consciousness will get inside of that body and walk around and do the bidding of maybe that sorcerer or that witch. And they were using fetishes to control these zombie-like people, and they were burying these fetishes in the ground to contaminate Gaia and to continue this this whole realm of feeding on essence and vitality and doing the bidding of density. So I was standing on this road and I saw one of those zombie-esque entities, and it looked at me and it ran into the forest. And I said, Chief, I see a part of the forest. And he said, oh, I'm down in the valley. You're up over there by the trees. And I had no idea, because all I could see was this limited view of the forest, because I'm still not there yet where Chief is, and I will never be, and I don't want to be, because Chief is what I said before, is the tip of the spear, and he's pushing this movement that can make consciousness free if they do what he says and what he instructs. And so I realized that he had a full perspective of where we were on the other side. Where I was looking at the zombies, he was already in the field dealing with the artifacts, and he could see us both in this whole scenario. And that's why whenever this person, Lemonhead, try to say that I was the powerhouse and that Chief was not, or this other person who tried to steal his Chief's thunder by saying that if it wasn't for me, Chief would be nothing, is foolishness. And I'm sorry, I'm using this forum as an outlet to make sure that my name is not a part of disrespecting and degrading Chief, and making sure that he gets all the credit that he so rightfully deserves. But sorry, and beyond that, it has to do also with freeing consciousness. In this movie, Willy Wonka, I had no idea that it was about enslaving consciousness as well as getting people to eat things that are going to lower their energy and contaminate their energy. So people think, oh, candy, that's cute. And I think a part of like an MC mirror consciousness that was in me was like, oh, candy, oh, like a kid. It wanted to stay a child. So it latched on to the concept of like, oh, candy and lots like this world made of candy. That's really cool. But it hid the concept that this film was promoting slavery. If you look up on Google and you said, where do the Oompa Loompas come from? It says that the Oompa Loompas were imported from Oompa Loompa land, and that it originally meant pygmy people from the pygmy genetics. Were That's what they intended, but then they changed it to Oompa Loompas because of the press that they got. And also this movie, it tells you it promotes respecting someone who's crazy, who's a bit loosely wired, because Wonka, he seems like uh, he's like on the verge of just losing his mind. Like you'll see him wigging out in the movie like several times, and like he'll just suddenly go from quiet to just like yelling. And this is a concept that's commonly projected, that if someone who's insane is smart. They're so insane, they're geniuses. They're so good at math that they're geniuses, but they can't do anything else. That's all they can do. And this concept is to get people to respect someone who's quite dense and open themselves up to them because they're being impressed. Oh, I'm impressed with this guy. He can invent all these things, but he's very loosely, he's got a screw loose, but I'm looking up to him because he's invented all these candies. He's invented all these machines that make candy. He's a genius. You should want to work, trying to get these kids to feel like, yeah, you should want to take his place whenever he passes on, take over the factory, take over inventing things. And that was the whole concept. But also it hid the fact that this is a pedophilic example. He wanted these kids at the end of the movie Willy Wonka, he ended up saying, "Oh, now you're going to live with me, young child." And the kids was smart enough to say, well, I'm going to have my relatives live with me too, so that he doesn't end up being a part of a pedophilic experience. So there was a lot of things that I didn't even see at first whenever I watched this movie. But like Jacinda said, watching movies with a new perspective, it's really refreshing and freeing, because I don't know if you're familiar with horse races, how they put blinders on the horse so they can't see this to the side, and they have to just go. It's about going straight, not seeing your whole environment. Like Chief said, being a radial thinker is getting out of line. So instead of watching movies in the way that they intend for you to watch it, you are viewing it through a Neo Shamanic perspective that gives you a fuller view. I remember Chief said that this realm is like looking at the world through a keyhole and trying to find your way, trying to keep from getting lost. But whenever you start this journey and you allow the words that Chief shares with you and the clearings that he does on clients, when you allow that energy to come through, then it breaks the keyhole, makes it wider. So your perspective gets larger and larger. Just like I was talking about with empathing, all I could see was this small area. But the more clear my energy gets, the more Chief bust through all those layers of the expressions that I've had that were weighing me down, and bust through the mindsets that I was holding on to, the concepts of family, the belief that the father unit actually cared about me when he didn't. He didn't. He was very selfish. It was all about him. And I opened up to his energy, so I was all about him. And I was doing his bidding. And I had no idea. I was a pawn of the father unit in my life. And I had no idea because I was blinded. I had the blinders on. I was looking through the keyhole. But now I can see it a bit wider. So if you're feeling, if you feel like you didn't see a perspective that Chief suggests or he shares with you, there's nothing to be ashamed about, because that's how this realm is set up. Stay in the chicken coop. Stay in the aquarium. Don't look that way, the way that we don't want you to look. Or if you're going to look that way, then only if it's going to lead you into another chicken coop or another aquarium or things like that. Is there any questions that I could answer? Other than that, there's the concepts of, in this movie, they have also not only people enslaved, they have animals enslaved too. He has like squirrels working for him and cracking nuts all day. And people think, oh well, it's an animal, it's not a person. But consciousness is consciousness, whether or not it's in animal form or in a humanoid form. So people think, oh well, maybe it's just that genetics that puts people in slavery. No, there's examples of slavery in all different races, and that comes from the other side, the density that has them enslaved. So people think, oh, this genetics is enslaving me, but actually they are already slaves of density. They're already pawns of density. So they're slaves to their attachments, and those attachments were slaves to their hierarchy, and those hierarchy were slaves to the yin of yin consciousness that created this realm. Slavery is meant to lower the vibration, forcing a consciousness to not be able to expand or express or experience. And the vibration that they end up having can get lower and lower as many times as they're recycled, lifetime after lifetime. I made a list of things that have to do with fears and things, different types of fears. If anyone has a fear that they'd like to share that they see that's common and they'd like some explanation about this fear, or maybe even a fear that they experience or that you've experienced, if you'd like to share that, I can talk about the Neo Shamanic perspective of that fear and how it's based and the programs that support it. Is there anyone who'd like to share about any fears?
I have fear of the unknown and fear of making like mistakes. Yeah.
That's a good one. So there's a lot of things that have to do with the fear of the unknown. So some of that is past expressions, or even in when you wanted to take a step that you were unfamiliar with and it turned out bad, or it turned out not the way that you wanted it to, then that fear can be highlighted, that fear can be built upon. So all these other expressions where you were hopeful that something was going to happen and then the bottom dropped out, and then you fed essence and vitality to density. So a lot of that is also your expectation of what the future is. I remember Chief says, don't worry about whatever you're going to face. It's better if you feel like whatever happens, I'm going to deal with it as it comes. Instead of trying, that's where planning can be an issue. Like Miss J was talking about, what about, routine and planning? It makes consciousness rigid. And when consciousness is rigid, it can break easier. You've seen people that are broken. They're loosely, there's the screw is a bit loose. They're not stable in their mental state. They're not stable in the way they behave. They can be easily triggered to like yell or attack other people, those kinds of things. And when you talk about fear of failure, understanding that there is no such thing as failure. There is experiences. So you've had experiences. Can you learn from them? Are you changing? Or do you just want someone to give you an excuse for behaving the way that you behave? Or do you really want to change and you really want to learn a new way of living? And it's not easy. It's not easy to change a habit, or it's not easy to change something that's made you very rigid. I I have been very rigid in my life. Christianity, the cult is super rigid. You know, you go to church every day of the week. You have to sit in prayer meetings for 30 minutes or an hour every day, twice a day, three times a day. Sometimes you have to go to these church services where there's like 6 sermons a day, 5 sermons a day, and you have to sit quietly for hours and hours and hours, and it just makes you feel more and more confined, like a room with no windows and no doors. And that's why whenever I began to listen to Chief and understand that I have this rigidness, the first thing you can do is start realizing what the issue is. If you have a fear of failure, when you or you have a fear of the unknown, when you're facing something that's unknown and you feel that feeling of fear, then you can identify it, and then you can begin to take care of containing it. Like today, when Chief was explaining to me about the 40-year-old version, I felt such insecurity and fear because I'm not melanated enough to talk about melanated issues, and it was triggering this insecurity, and I wasn't accepting that I had this insecurity from in the past, when I had relatives that would always try to minimize me anytime I tried to change my life, or tried to make a free myself from the church, or try to um, do singing or do drawing. They would be like, you need to draw like this, you need to sing like this, or they would criticize everything I did. I was still carrying that trauma. And whenever I had to face this feeling like, okay, I'm going to be talking about race, what about what other people think? So many different programs running at the same time. So I had to take a step back and be like, okay, contain the program of caring what people think. If other people are zombies, if other people are non-player characters, and they're dense, they're very much controlled by their density, why do I care what they think? So I need to contain that too. Because a lot of times people fear failure mostly because of what other people will say about what they consider failure. Or they fear failure because what other people, family, or even how they have an expectation of themselves. If you just take every decision as it goes. Uh, be sensitive. Use your empath abilities to feel what's going on in your energy. To feel, okay, this is an insecurity. I'm going to contain that and throw it in the vortex of no return. And I'm going to bring it up to Chief. Sometimes people will be insecure, or they will feel inadequate, or they feel like you said, like they're a failure. But then they'll lie to Chief because they want to cover up the what they consider pain. Also, whenever you view something as too painful to look at, sometimes people they consider it a failure because they feel it's too painful to analyze the situation and see what they can do that's constructive to move forward. But instead they just want to hide what they've done and not actually take the proper steps to move forward. Because just even if someone, like we've had clients that would behave in a certain way, very disrespectful to Chief, trying to tell him what to do and what days to work, and what he can or can't do, like he expressed on hashtag Ask the Chief. That forum, he was saying that someone was saying, I don't want you to talk to me, I just want you to clear me. And when people are trying to tell you what to do, that kind of thing is trying to put Chief in a box, trying to minimize you, trying to define you, trying to put you in a box. So if you put yourself in the box of failure, or you put yourself in the box of fear, then you are keeping yourself there by believing that this is real. Like, for example, there's a lot of fears. Like, for example, fear of punishment, fear of failure or imperfection. It's also believing in the program of it. Like, for example, sometimes people fear failure because they fear that there's going to be a punishment that comes with it. But if they understand that it doesn't have to be that way. Sometimes people believe that if it's always happened to me this way, that's how it's going to be forever. If I've never been good at this, then I can never change because that's just who I am. And it keeps them in the box, keeps them going in a circle over and over again. I hope that's okay.
Yes, I could relate pretty much to like pushing the pain away because like you don't want to look at it, but you just bury it. So better like keep containing it until everything is better, right?
Yes, and also realizing that sometimes people want a quick fix for what they consider a failure, when there is no quick fix to fixing sometimes something that is a real hang up in their energy. It takes step by step, doing containment every day, reading. Like, for example, whenever I first met Chief's daughter, I would write down everything she told me that was about energy, because I always felt like I would forget it. And every day I would read it right before I go to bed, or right before I eat, or whenever I'm waiting at a red light, or whenever I'm waiting in line at the store. I would just bring out my list. And I would also write down a list of things that I felt like I was struggling with insecurities, struggling with fear of what people think about me, struggling with defining myself, struggling with self-worth, struggling with the concept of failure, struggling with living up to someone else's expectations. So I would write down those things, and every day I would contain those certain topics every day. And I would contain the memories that had to do with feeding what I considered was failure, or feeding what I considered fueling the insecurity. Like, for example, there was times in my life where someone would just, and they would just start making fun of me out of nowhere. Like, I don't even know this person, and they would just get up in my face and tell me that I was a loser. So I had to distance myself from the trauma, contain it, and throw it in the vortex of no return. And whenever I would do this each day, it began to change me. It was a slow process. I've been at this for 9 years and something. And I have a lot of maturing to do. So that's why, I appreciate all of you and being patient with my transformation, because I don't know everything. All I am doing is sharing my perspective of what I've learned with Chief and what Chief tells me. And that will help you. Just go slow with it. There's no quick fix to, I did something again, the same kind of habit. Oh man, I thought the same way. Oh, I had this situation where I didn't change the way I behaved. That's okay if you realize that you don't want to be this way, and you're making the right decisions to move forward. Like, for example, I would listen if I was a client that wasn't myself. I would be watching all the forums. Whenever I have free time and I don't want to watch Netflix, I would watch the forums again. Repetition, and I would push that stuff into my energy. I would push the information from the forums into my energy by listening repetition. I would reread the My Neo Shamanic Journey, the book that Chief wrote. I would read it over and over until it really seeped into my consciousness, because that's what advertisements do. That's what movies do. They push these mantras into your head. I am my genetics. I am defined by the system. I am defined by my financial status. I'm defined by what I look like. I'm defined by ugly or pretty. It's mantra after mantra. And so if you are spending your time with more inundating yourself with neo-shamanic perspective, it will help you fight the inundation of all these movies, all these media, all the news, all this worry, all this fear, because you're spending your time doing and thinking with a neo-shamanic perspective. Like that people say, you are what you eat. What you put into your mind, you're feeding your mind. So if you are what you eat, what do you feed your mind every day? What do you think about every day? Do you think about movies the most? Do you think about media the most? Do you think about the worries of your culture, or the worries of the news, or the worries of this corona things all every day? What are you feeding if you are what you eat? So that's why those who have sessions the most, they are feeding their mind with a new perspective, and they change this. And also, what are you doing on your free time? If you're only spending 2 hours with Chief, but you're spending 20 hours on social media, how can you say, I really want to change? How can you say, I really want to be different, when the mass amount of your time you're spending feeding yourself density? But I've definitely fed myself plenty of density. I used to feel like I wanted to just hide in movies, hide in the fantasy, hide in animes and things. I used to identify myself with characters. Like, oh, I'm a lot like this character in that movie. And I would feel like I want to emulate that behavior. But really, I was instilling a density, and I was believing it, and I was feeding my mind with that information that density put out there. I hope that's helpful.
Yep.
Very helpful. Very helpful.
Thank you very much. Is there any other fears I could talk about with you? Or I can just start reading a list as well. And if anyone wants to chime in about questions, we can do that too. Okay. So, for example, fear that you're not special. I know that there's a concept that I have to be special. I have to make my mark, or dot dot dot, and they don't even know what would happen if I wasn't special. The concept of being special is a yin of yin program, because in the Supreme Consciousness universe, there's no need to be special. For example, in your body, the heart has a function, the mind, the brain has a function, your eyes have a function. Your eyes are not telling your heart, oh, you're not good enough, because without me you can't see the rest of the world. Without me you can't do this or that. I'm more special than you, heart. That doesn't happen. Everyone has a function. Everyone respects each other for their function and what they're doing and what their expression is and what they're bringing to the table, what they're bringing to Supreme Consciousness universe. There's no like looking down on you. You're a loser because you're a toenail. No, you have a purpose, whether you're a younger consciousness or an older consciousness. And that's how Yin of Yin gets people to believe in this concept by hierarchy, seniority, status. All these things are supporting Yin of Yin. So the more you feed yourself a Neo Shamanic perspective, the less you'll feel less about yourself. There's also the fear that they're not living up to the illusion of themselves. Sometimes people see, I am a successful person, but maybe if they lose their job, then they're having a crisis, they're having trauma, because suddenly this concept of being a successful person seems to be totally gone. And then density comes in for the kill, and they get a lot of essence and vitality because someone's having an identity crisis. So if you view yourself as consciousness, no one can take that away from you. And they cannot feed on your essence and vitality in the way that they could if you did have an illusion of yourself. So there's also fear of not having what other people have. In this realm, they have all these advertisements about things like, you want to be on a yacht, you want to have stay in a 5-star hotel, or wine and cheese, swimming in money, all these things that are meaningless when you transition. You can't take it with you, and it has no energetic value, because the most valuable commodity is your energy. So what is this other stuff? It's nonsense. It's a distraction to distract you that you're in a prison in your mind, distract you that you're in the chicken coop, distract you that density is feeding on your essence and vitality and using you as a chicken. There's also fear, like some other different varieties of fear. So whenever I talked about how density views people as chickens, views people as food, they have the vending machine with the different flavors of soda or whatever, different flavors of essence and vitality that they get from different types of fear, but it's all under the fear umbrella. And that's the basis for this yin of yin realm, to scare people into staying in the prison. Like Chief talked about, people for animals that have been taken from the wild and put into zoos. And then someone gets a bright idea and thinks, "Oh, I'll just let these animals free into the wild." But they've been in prison so long that they open up the prison gates and they just sit there, as they don't know their fear of the unknown, fear of being, let out into a place they're unfamiliar with, because they've been in prison so long. So that's what the Neo Shamanism prepares you for. It's about preparation for seeing and being more than just a chicken, being consciousness, understanding what that is. It's not an easy fix. Like some people want to talk about being enlightened, but they have no idea that they have a map of their energy with layer after layer of their expression. That all that has to be cleared out first before you can get any concept of enlightenment. That's why all these like gurus, all this new age about enlightenment, they will never get enlightened, because they will never break through all those layers of their expressions, all those layers of density. We're talking about the fears that you believe in this expression. What about the other expressions that you have, the kinds of fears that they programmed you to think, the kinds of things that they taught you to be impressed by, the kinds of things that they got you to believe in the concept of competition, of fatalism, of the concept of family and friends, and all those other expressions. But that's why it's a process, session after session, going through different experiences that you've had in other expressions that are weighing you down. Like it's as if you're walking and you have these anchors that are holding you back, and you're just dragging them. So Chief is cutting those anchors off one by one, so that you can walk, take baby steps, keep going forward. You don't have to run, just walk forward, and you'll actually get to a destination that is far more than financial status rising, or having a ton of followers, or being the president or something like that, because people put too much stock in followers. Followers means nothing when most people on the planet are controlled by their density. If someone has tons of followers, that means that what they're sharing with the public is not a threat to density. Chief has a client named Nellie, and she put out a post. Usually her post gets a certain amount of followers, but then she put out a post with Chief's music, and the number drastically declined for that one post with Chief's music, because what he teaches is a threat to density. What he teaches is a threat to those who want to control consciousness behind the scenes. So that's why I love to learn and then share what I learn with you, because there's all kinds of fears, like fears of spiders, fear of cockroaches, fear of the dark, fear of leeches, fear of dark water, deep water, fear of bacteria, fungus, fear of blood, fear of mold, fear of sickness, fear of fire, fear of disease, fear of bats, fear of torture, all these things. And if you can identify with any of these fears, that just means that that's the type of program that's been put in your energy. So it can give you, instead of feeling sad that you have a program or that you have a fear, understanding it is the first step to getting past it. Accepting that you have this fear. Because I remember Chief's daughter told me, "You have a lot of fear in your energy." And immediately I wanted to deny it. I just wanted to be like, "Oh no, I'm not afraid. I'm really bold. I'm a very bold person." And then she's like, "No, you have a lot of fear." So I went back and I thought about it. And I thought about how I feel about myself, and I thought about what fears do I have? And then I realized she was right. And I came back to her and I was like, I'm really sorry. I actually do have a lot of fears. And these are some of the fears that I have. And that's what you can do when, if Chief says, you know what, you're afraid of something. And instead of putting up a wall immediately, defending yourself, just be like, okay, you know what, I can handle this. Maybe I believe he's right. And then when you are able to face what you consider yourself, then you can move forward. You can overcome the fear of spiders, fear of the dark, or fear of leeches, or fear of blood or sickness. Because whenever you understand it with a Neo Shamanic perspective, you can see that these are just hat tricks of density. The darkness, the outer space, or the universal supreme consciousness universe, in outer space, it has dark, but that's to make the stars stand out. I remember they would say concepts of like empty space, or that it's just a void of space, when everything in the universe, supreme consciousness universe, that's balanced, is energy. And those consciousness that are a threat, like people would say, I'm afraid of whatever is on the other side, that's because it's just density from this realm. This realm is so small compared to everything that supreme consciousness has, and that is coming. That's what Corona is, a reaction to what's happening on the other side. That's positive, that's bringing the Neo Shamanic movement forward. So is there any other fears that you'd like to share, or I'll just continue with the list?
It's actually helpful to hear the list, because then I'm like, oh, okay, yep, I can identify which ones I'm relating to.
Okay, thank you. I had the same feeling. I looked up online like a list of phobias, and I was like, oh wow, I actually still have a fear program about deep water that's black, like that I can't see through. I have some sort of fear program about that. Fear program about cockroaches. Fear program about torture or dismemberment, or like losing an eye or something like that. I still need to work on that, those feelings that I have inside that are based, that are created by density. And it could be possibly some kind of past expression trauma. It could be just me believing in it in this realm. It could be a memory that I have in this expression, with cockroaches trying to get on me. There's a lot of things, but if I would, every night before I went to bed, I would contain all kinds of different things that I felt that I struggled with, especially when it came to fear, or it came to insecurity, which is another form of fear. And also, even though I'm sharing with you like the different examples, it's all a vibration. It's all an energy. It's not the individual words. It's the fear vibration itself. So when you contain it, you can contain it that way as well. Sometimes, most of the time, density is always about splitting things up, making boxes. So it's like some people will try to deny that they have this fear, but I have that fear, when it's all fear. There's also, for example, fear of heights, or fear of seeing ugly things. When I was younger, I wanted to turn off the ability to see things on the other side, because I didn't want to see anything ugly. I didn't want to face that there was something that wasn't appealing to look at. It's like I wanted to stay in this realm of glitter and sparkly things and, cute little toys and dolls, because life sucked being molested. Life sucked being in the cult. So I distracted myself with this glitter and these toys and this concept of that I could hide behind only seeing pretty things. But whenever Chief taught me about what fear is, and about attachments that will try to push their intent on you. So the more clear you are, the more sessions you have, the more that Chief clears through those energy, the more you can overpower the intent of the attachments to make you feel fear. You can push them back. because your intent is getting clear, and you can use Chief's intent, which is the strongest intent that in my opinion, there's no intent stronger than Chief's because of the reasons that I explained. He doesn't have these fears that I'm about to list. And I had to learn that by just watching him, because I live with him. I can swear to you that these things don't exist in his energy. And that's why his intent can reach anyone on a Skype session, no matter where they are in the world, because of the clarity of his energy. So that's what we're working for, our own journey, our own clarity of energy, and the abilities and the expressions that you'll have as you get more clear. So now I can, whenever I first started doing sessions with Chief, I would wear a uniform, and I had to change the uniform every time we had every day that we had a session, because the clothing would absorb the density from clients, and it would make me feel sick and nauseous, and it felt like worms were crawling on my body, and I just couldn't handle it. But as my energy got more and more clear by listening to what Chief said, and like I said, inundating myself with Neo Shamanic perspective, now I can wear the same uniform for as many days as we have sessions, or as many days as I wanted to use it, instead of just one time and then have to wash it immediately. So you can build up to the strength to resist the density, like whenever Chief shared about being in a septic tank. The only way to the poop from getting on you is with the neo-shamanic perspective, because it's from outside of this realm, and it can repel the density that's all throughout this realm. Some of the other fears, as we talked about, was fear of death. So in the 40-year-old version, she's staying in this miserable expression sometimes because they don't want to die. They feel like there's a program there, or like a concept where people think this is just one life, this is my only life and I have to live it up, and death is the worst thing ever, when death is just transition. Even in the movie 40-year-old version, I liked how she was trying to tell people that I'm just tired of trying to tell people that my mom died, trying to getting sympathy from people, because they can feed off of someone when they open up about, oh, this relative died or this person died, and trying to get you to be sad again, or trying to get you to reminisce instead of forward motion. So the fear of death is a really really big program that you'll see all throughout. You'll watch it in movies, and you'll see it in people's daily life. They'd rather be in a miserable situation than to transition. There's also fear. Sometimes people are more afraid of their relatives or people that they care about dying than they are of themselves passing away. But it keeps you locked into this realm. In many sessions with Chief, there were ghosts, and these ghosts, they still think that they're in those lifetimes. But they're not very much different than these people who view this one expression in this life as almost like their only life, as if they didn't have other expressions and they weren't other things in the past. But being able to understand yourself in totality, understanding all the expressions that you've had before, it's not important to go back. Sometimes Chief will talk to people about their Egyptian past lives, and they'll want to be Egyptian again, or they want to, be this omnipotent, powerful being but they're viewing it through the concept of density and media and movies. So they're viewing this concept of being this Egyptian deity, but through the concept of, I'm afraid that I'm not special. I'm afraid that I don't matter. I'm afraid that I won't live up to the illusion that I have of myself. So there's an understanding that whatever you have a fear of is also rooted with programming too. So like, for example, fear of the future or fear of tomorrow, fear of being forgotten, fear of being alone. That's a really big one. You'll see in movies and in like all sorts of media, oh, you're alone. Oh, you're alone. Like, for example, in Japan, on Valentine's Day, you know, people feel really alone. Oh, I don't have a relationship. Oh, I don't have, you know, so and so. I don't have a lover. But if you're consciousness and you view yourself as a consciousness, a part of the whole of supreme consciousness, how can you be alone? If you're a cell in the body of a million other cells, how can you be alone? That's why density wants consciousness to feel themselves separate. You can't, whenever you're vibrating low, yes, you're separated. But if you are moving forward in a Neo Shamanic way, you are reconnecting. You are working on reconnecting to the whole. So you will receive support if you're having genuine effort in following what Chief has shared with us. Then you are reconnecting. So you're never alone. And also, like Chief talked about, how your body is your closest companion. Your body is the one who's supporting you. So you're not alone. So you don't need a relationship externally. You don't need a lover. And that's also another way that density will use to bring someone to lower your vibration. Friends, family, lovers, sometimes it's just an excuse for them to try to tell you what to do, to try to tap you out, to try to push you back into the chicken coop, to try to push you back into the fish, into the aquarium, to try to define you as a fish, to try to define you as a chicken, to try to define you as something in this realm. When there's so much more better things ahead, if you're following in the way that Chief is sharing, it's a total different kind of freedom. If there's any questions, this is the last question I can take, and then we'll be done for today.
Wow,
Okay.
the information was so helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Nara. Thank you, everyone, for coming. It was a real pleasure talking with you. And I hope you have a great rest of your day or night.
Thank you. You too.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.